Donny Osmond, Eyes Don't Lie. We're going to disassemble this cassette tape today. Now, it's interesting. The reason I have this, I wasn't like a big Donny Osmond fan, although I do have to admit I really like Donny Osmond. When I was a little kid, Donny and Marie were the kind of the biggest thing in the world. Matter of fact, Marie Osmond. So here at the studio, we have the part of the company that does the analog to digital media conversion, where we take old audio and videotapes and turn them into digital. And it's part of a big recording studio. And Marie Osmond's actually been here in the recording studio before. She's super cool. I mean, really, really down to earth. And she was, anyway, when I was a young guy, she was one of the biggest stars on the planet. You may not even know who I'm talking about today, but she was huge. And so was Donny. These two, Donny and Marie, were just enormous, worldwide monster superstars. Well, anyway, then they kind of went out of favor. Once the early 80s hit, it was like a lot of people where they just get too big. And then the pendulum swings the other side, and then not only are they not popular anymore, their name kind of becomes poisonous. That happens to a lot of people, and it definitely happened with Donny Osmond. And then he kind of disappeared. And then in 1989, he came back with a self-titled album, and they originally released it without telling anybody who it was, because they were afraid that no one would listen to the song knowing that it was Donny Osmond, because his name had become such poison, which is amazing to think about. And it was called Soldier of Love. That came out in 1989, and then they announced who it was, and it actually became a hit. Well, then the next year they put out another album, and the reason I have this, I was in Denver, and whenever I go to Denver, I usually go to Wax Trax. It's a record store there, and I just kind of flip through things. And I was over on their cassette tape wall, just kind of scanning down, and this jumped out at me because it looked so weird. It was hard; you could barely read it. It was this white cassette, and it had this orange writing. I thought, "What the heck is that?" And I reach up and grab it, and I go, "Oh, Donny Osmond." And what this was, and this reason it jumped out at me, is this is actually a promotional copy of his follow-up album. So this, I think, was released in 1989, but it was a promotional copy that was put out it was released in 1990, I think, and then this promotional copy was put out in 89. And it ended up, they had this song on here, the song Eyes Don't Lie. I think that is the song. It's actually, I hate to admit it, it's total 80s. It's a totally 80s song, but it's kind of awesome. If you like that old 80s sound, it's really cool. And Donny Osmond, I mean, come on, let's get real. The guy was awesome. And still today, I think he plays down in Vegas. That's why Marie, I think, lives here in St. George somewhere, which is where the studio is. We get a lot of actually semi-famous and some famous people in here because in St. George, it's the only real recording studio. Plus, and then again, and like I said, we also have the part of our studio that does the analog to digital media conversion. And we get cassette tapes and videotapes sent in from all over the country. Now, we don't digitize this kind of tape because it's copyrighted, but still they're fun to take apart and show on these videos. And so I wanted to disassemble this. So I bought it just because it looked interesting, and this isn't what the final CD tape looked like. This is a promotional copy, and I think it even says that here somewhere, for promotional only, not for sale. And so they originally just printed this out on this. It's actually kind of just cardstock. Looks like it was hand folded, but it's Capitol Records, and it was just, again, this was just sent out to probably some radio stations. Oh, here it is, 1990. Sent out to some radio stations and things saying, hey, this is the new Donny Osmond album. He's come back. Here we go. Publication, Rolling Stones people have recognized Donny Osmond's 1989 success as the pop music comeback story of the decade. In a business where hype and puffery are commonplace, Osmond's accomplishments are not only real but astonishing. One of Capitol Records' most successful artists in 1989. Yeah, and again, the guy, however much I don't want to admit it, he was awesome. And he just really was great. And I think he has a show in Vegas now. So anyway, what I'm going to do, interestingly, this tape is held together with glue. And so you can't open it up with screws. So one of the things I'm going to show you that we do here, because we've had people ask a little bit about this, what do we do about tapes that don't have screws, that are glued together? How do we get into them? And the answer to that question is we just break them. Some tapes break easier than others, and I've tried so many different things where we've taken razors and we've tried to, because all these tapes have a kind of this seal that goes along. This is where it's all sealed together. Down in here, it's not sealed as much along the seam in here, but it is along these seams. At least usually that's the case. And then what we have to do if we're going to get in there, because sometimes what happens, we get tapes sent into us that are broken, and then the tape's pulled in, and there's only one thing you can do, and that's break it open and get in there and fix it. And so we end up doing this quite a bit. And I'll just kind of show you what we do, the steps we take to try to break into it to get this fixed. And I'm sacrificing a Donny Osmond promo tape to show you how to do it. And with a little bit of luck, we'll be able to get it apart and get it back together and kind of show you how this works. You'll see on the outside here how this is written in white. All the imprinting is in white. And it's kind of against the black background, but that black background that you see there is not part of the tape. It's actually this thing that I'll show you once we get it open. You can see the different pieces that make up. That's why I want to do this, so you can see what it looks like on the inside of a tape and kind of how we get into them if they don't have the screws, if we have to break them. And so normally what we'll do, I'll see if we can, oh, you hear that? I'll see if we can break the seal, which it sounded like we just did in one spot. And if we can break the seal in a couple of spots, it makes it a little easier to break into. There, you can hear it a little bit. And so then what we'll do is right here, these are the Record Protect tabs. Now, in a tape like this that we buy that was produced by a record company, these are basically little holes. And what those do is they prevent you from recording over the tape. And what happens when you put a tape in a player, and it kind of goes into place, there's a little, I don't know how to explain it, but it's like this little button or a knob. And as the tape moves up into place, it pulls in like that. And when that little knob is pushed down, it disables the record button. And if that tab, a tape that you normally buy to record on, like a TDK or a Maxell or whatever, there's a little plastic tab there. And what that does is when the tape goes in place, it keeps that little button from going down, and that allows you to record on it. So a tape like this, you could record over it, but what you'd have to do is you'd have to get like a little piece of tape and do something like this. You take a little piece of tape and you just put it over that, and then just do it on that side too. And then this would act like any tape you bought at the store to record over, like a Maxell or a TDK. And then it would actually just record completely over the stuff that's on there. Okay, so now what I'm going to do, so anyway, in these tabs right here, in these spots, that's one of the few places you have to give you leverage as you try to do this. So what we'll do is I'll just kind of put the screwdriver, you see that right there, how that just broke open? And then what I'll do is I'll get that screwdriver in there. Sometimes I use a flathead. I shouldn't be using this screwdriver because I'll never play this tape, so I'm not really concerned about it. But this screwdriver actually is magnetic. And so theoretically, you shouldn't let it get next to the tape because it could theoretically damage the tape. So I'm going to be a little more precise about this. I don't think this one's magnetized. And I'm going to, as you saw right there, that broke the seal. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to just kind of bring it down there along that way. Then you can see it kind of starts breaking the side. So now I've got that whole side done. And now I'm going to do this side. There you go. And that just popped it open. Now normally, in these cases, it depends on the manufacturer. It looks like on this side, they have it, let's see, is that right? This is side, yeah, okay. I flipped it upside down the wrong way. Normally you want to have, no, I did that. I did it the right way. Well, I should have left that and pulled side 2 off because all these things got moved out of place, but I'll show you where they go. So the inside of a tape, I showed you first of all how the thing is written in white and how there's black behind it. What this is this is a gasket, and it just lifts off, and so you can see there that the writing, if you were to put it over something white, you can't read it at all. And that's not why they have the gasket there, but that's one of the benefits of having that gasket right there, is that it enables you to read, and they planned that ahead of time, obviously. But that gasket does more than that, though. The purpose of this, and you can see that it has these little ridges. So what it does is it keeps the tape, first of all, from rubbing against the plastic as it spins, but it does something even, in some ways, more important than that. And you'll see that it has these kind of ridges, that it's embossed a little bit. And what that does is it keeps it, and this is a pretty good example, and you see there's one over on this side too, a little gasket. That little ridge, those little ridges, those little bumps, basically as the tape is turning, as it's spooling up, it gives just this tiny little bit of pressure on either side, which just helps it spool up really smooth. And tapes basically all cassette tapes are going to have this little gasket in there. I don't know if you're going to find one that doesn't. And sometimes, even if it doesn't look like there's one in there, it's just clear. They do it so you can see the tape, but there's still one in there. These ridges, you can imagine, they just kind of put a little bit of pressure up and a little bit of pressure down on this spool, so as it spools onto the reel, it's nice and smooth. That's what it does there. Then this right here, this little piece of metal sits right there, and that is a kind of a little magnetic shield. And what that does is, when you're playing a tape, let's just say that this is the play head, and when you push play on a tape deck, it pushes the head up like that, and then that's what touches the tape. And there's a little bit of magnetic signal being generated right there, and kind of like I didn't want to touch the screwdriver to the tape because it's magnetic, this little shield keeps all the little magnetic stuff that's going on right there from getting theoretically onto the tape and damaging potentially the audio on the tape. Because theoretically, if I ran a big magnet right over this thing, it would destroy all the sound on the tape. And when you're actually recording onto a tape, there is a head that records, but there's also an erase head right next to it. So if you were to look at a tape deck head, it would kind of look like there'd be these two things right next to each other, and the tape would actually erase, and then it would record onto it. If you disabled the erase head, you would just keep recording over and over. So if you ever used to record on tapes and you recorded over something, the reason you could record over it is because it erased it first before it recorded onto it, with this little thing called an erase head. If you took the erase head out, you would just keep recording over and over, and it would just keep adding onto whatever was on there instead of removing it and recording over it. Now, which brings us to another thing, which is this little thing called a pressure pad, and that sits right there. And what that is as the tape is going from one to the other, as the head goes up, it pushes on that a little bit. You see how it bends? It's on that little piece of copper, that little mount, and the tape goes in there. And that, as it runs in between there, that helps it have nice, solid connection to the playhead, the actual oxide tape. That gives it a nice, solid connection, and that's why that's there. And what happens when we get tapes sent in the studio, we get them, again, by the thousands, this little pad is held on there by adhesive. And we have a whole bunch of videos where I actually show you how that sometimes falls off, and then you just glue it back on. In this case, it hasn't, obviously. So we're just gonna, but one of the first things we do when a tape comes into the studio is we check to make sure that little pad is attached, because if it's not, and you're not getting that solid connection from the playhead, it just won't sound as good. So if you own an old Donny Osmond tape, you should check them and see if that little pad's there. And actually, any tape you might own, it's worth looking, because if that pad is gone, And sometimes it'll just fall off and it'll be sitting there in the case, or it'll fall off into your tape deck or something. You'll never see it again. We have bags of them because it's so common. Well, we've had projects where somebody will send in a box with a couple hundred tapes in it, and as we take the tapes out, the whole bottom of the box is just filled with these pressure pads, and we end up gluing them all back on so that it'll sound right. So in this case, these little wheels, you'll see these things, they set right there on that little post. Oh, and this is an example. That, in this case right here, and I'm not going to remove it because it's kind of hard to put back on, but that's a little piece of metal. And sometimes that little piece of metal is just kind of pushed into a little hole that's in the plastic injection mold that makes the shell. And you'll see there's another wheel right there. There's one on both sides. And these wheels spin freely. You'll see that it just kind of spins like that. And as the tape goes from one side to the other, it kind of goes around that post right there, over the reel, over the head and the pressure pad, back across to that side. And then side A, side B, as it just goes back and forth. And these little wheels just kind of help it move smoothly through the shell. Now, as you can see, these things just kind of come out. You can just pick them up and remove them, and and that just sits like so. And then this right here, this white stuff is called leader tape. And the leader tape actually connects to the audio tape. You can see it looks like there's that's interesting. There's some little mildew or mold or something growing on the tape right there. That's kind of interesting. I don't see that very often. We actually had a project once where somebody sent in a bunch of 78 RPM records that were probably 60, 70 years old. I mean, they were sold and they were just covered with mildew. We had to go through a pretty painstaking process to get it all cleaned off so we could get good captures of those things. But 78 RPM records. So all audio tape will have a leader tape at the beginning, and then it'll connect to I think it's ferric oxide or iron oxide. It's a type of iron that the tape is made out of. And you'll see right there that the two things, the leader and the oxide, are stuck together, and that's because there's basically that piece of adhesive on that side right there. You can see that adhesive, how it spans the two. And you know that this is the side that has the audio signal, and this side doesn't. And the reason you can tell is because the tape that holds these two things together, and that's basically just kind of like, it's nothing more than like a piece of Scotch tape. Since that's the side that the head's on, you don't want the tape running across the playhead. So they put the tape that sticks the two things together on the opposite side. And a lot of times when people fix these tapes, they don't realize that, and they'll just put tape all the way around it. We get tapes sent in here that people have repaired, and that's not the way to do it. You want tape on this side so that it doesn't, the repair doesn't actually touch the head. So then what I'm going to do is I'm going to spool it back up. And sometimes that oxide tape is hard to manage, but I'm going to get it back on there. The leader tape is a little sturdier, so it's not as hard, it's not as flimsy, and it doesn't flip around as much. It's a little easier to manage. And then we're going to, matter of fact, we didn't have to damage this tape too much to get it open, so we're going to be able to play some Donny Osmond again. This tape will live to see another day. So now we have to take the leader tape, we're going to run it around, again, that post, then that wheel, and then on this side, that wheel and that post. You'll notice I'm doing a lot of this with my fingers. I suggest if you ever do this, because you do have oils and things in your fingers, to just wash your hands really, really good before you touch this stuff. I'm not super worried about it because you probably never play these tapes again, but that's what we do when we're working here. I've tried doing it with gloves and other things, and it's just so hard. And so, you use tweezers where you can, but other times you've really got to get your fingers in there to grab it and touch it. And it just wash your hands really well so you're not getting oils and things all over the tape. So I've kind of got that in place now. These kind of have a little ridge they kind of set in so they don't move too much. And now that that's there, I'm going to flip this back over, and then I'm going to show you what we do now to keep it sealed shut. And it's interesting, those gaskets, there's no adhesive on them, but they still kind of usually, and watch, it won't do it now. But yeah, there he goes. It just kind of sticks and it holds in place. Sometimes they don't, and then you have to set it on the tape and then put the shell back over the top of it. I didn't feel like it snapped. Well, I guess it won't. Anyway, so now that's together, and this will play again. So now the last thing we do, in this case where we have to break it apart like so to get it to again, if we had to break this open to repair it, what we would do now is I just grab a little bit of, just have tape like this, and what we would do is just put one piece right there, and then just one on the other side. And that usually does it. That's all you really need to do. Now that tape, this thing will go back and play in a player like nothing ever happened. And that's really all there is to it. So you can actually take, if you need to repair a tape, that's how you break into it. You start off kind of cracking the shell. And I'll be honest with you, there's some tapes that don't come apart as easily as that one did, where you just end up destroying, I mean, literally just destroying it to get into it. It's not a big deal because these tapes generally are universal. So, and what we'll do sometimes, if it does happen where we take it and it just falls apart while we're working on it, we have boxes full of shells, and we'll just put it in a new shell and it'll just work like nothing ever happened. And then we'll take the old shell, attach it with a rubber band, and send it back to you, but you'll have a functional tape then. But usually, most of the time when people send these things in, this may be the last time that tape's ever played, because they're sending it in to us to digitize it, and then once it's been digitized, they may never play it again. Like this will, and I'm not going to digitize this. Like I said, we don't do these copyrighted tapes, but the stuff that gets sent in to us, we get stuff sent in from churches, from families, individuals, government agencies, whatever, and I think I may have mentioned in this video, I know I've mentioned in others, we've had one project where we did over 100,000 tapes for one client. And it was just a bunch of government things, tapes that needed to be, historical things that need to be kept. And we've done, I could go on forever talking about all the cool people we've done these things for, different, and churches and individuals and what have you. And so that's what we do here at Audio Mover. We take old audio and videotapes and turn them into digital. So by the way, if you have old audio and videotapes need to be digitized, go to audiomover.com. We'd love to help you. And besides that, if not, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, leave any comments, especially if you were a Donny Osmond fan. If you have any memories of Donny. I met him once when I was a kid, and it was funny because when I was a little kid, I remember we went and saw them because we lived in Salt Lake, and we saw them in concert or something, and I met both Donny and Marie, and then it was just a couple of years ago, I'd moved our whole recording studio down to St. George, and then we got contacted by, I don't know if it was a publishing company or record company or something, but we're one of the only recording studios in this part of the country, in this state, this part of the Utah at least. And so they sent Marie Osmond over here, and she was delightful. She was so much fun. We sat and talked. I grabbed a record as she was leaving. I said, "Hey, you mind signing this thing?" And so I'd seen her 50 years ago or whatever it was, and now I'm seeing her again. It wasn't quite that long, but still, you get the idea. It was really cool. Anyway, Donny was awesome. I still think he was one of the greats. The guy just had it. He had that X factor. You watch some of that old Osmond stuff, and of course the Osmonds, the brothers, were famous before he showed up. But man, you see some of that stuff when he's young, and it was a little bit like when Michael Jackson joined the Jackson brothers, like he was this little kid, and Donny was that kid. Just, he's already got these famous brothers, but then he shows up, and it was like, oh my gosh. Now, Merrill, I don't want to get off on this too much. Merrill, for my money, was the rock star in that group. I mean, that guy, you go watch some of that old Osmond stuff, and he had it. He was the rock star. But Donny was the pop star. He was the one that just had that thing, that X factor that just made him just spectacular. Merrill was the something about him had that rock and roll energy, but Donny had the just charisma thing that just made, and that smile, and just good looking guy. And between him and Marie, they were just awesome. And it was funny watching how he went so out of favor for years and years and years, and then of course Soldier of Love came out, and then he kind of started coming back into the public conscience, and then he just ended up being, over time, as we start looking back and remembering how great some of these people were, Donny was one of those people. You go, man, this guy was just awesome. And I think, again, I'm pretty sure, I go down to Vegas a lot because I fly in at an airport, and I see his picture show up periodically, so I think he's performing down there. But guy was just awesome. The Osmonds were great. Anyway, please subscribe to the channel, like the video, and leave any comments, again, questions you have, other videos you'd like to see us make. And anyway, with that, thanks for watching, and have a fantastic day.